the Budget Advocacy Network ban and partners in their analysis of the tribunal's report investigating suspended Auditor General Leone and former Deputy Auditor General Tamba Momo has revealed significant procedural and evidentiary concerns, sparking calls for greater transparency and adherence to due process in Sierra Leone's public institutions. Now, the report, which recommended the removal of both officials, is now under thorough scrutiny for its handling of legal standards and potential biases. Now, the analysis recommended that Parliament defer debate on the tribunal's recommendations until a comprehensive annex of evidence is produced. So this morning, to discuss the issue and more, we have been joined by Abubakar Kamara, who is National Coordinator, BAN. Good morning. And Imran Sillah from the Strategic Comms Unit, MYC. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity.
Good morning, Ravi, and good morning, Sierra Leoneans.
It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Now, I've read from the intro, but could you please take us through, indeed, the nitty-gritties of the argument that BAN is putting forward?
In the first place, it's not just BAN, it's a coalition of 6 organizations that involve the Citizen Barrier, the Eminent Women of Peace, ILRAJ, 50-50 Slash, and then BAN. So
you are representing this consortium?
Yes, so okay. For this purpose here, I'm not just representing BAN, I'm representing these 6 institutions, credible institutions.
Okay. So what are the nitty-gritties of the argument?
Firstly, since the suspension of the Auditor General, we condemn the act, that it is a bad precedent for this country, especially in the area of audit accountability. We saw what happened transpire. The process was flawed. There are missteps in the process of the suspension of the Auditor General. We saw where the rule of law and the rule of natural justice is not prevailing. I can give you an example for that. Lavatelo Pierce filed a case at the Supreme Court questioning the constitutionality of the tribunal formed, questioning the qualification of the members. That case was not enlisted to any panelists until after the tribunal report had been completed. So the case was only enlisted in July this year, and up to now no hearing. So that tells you that, just to give an example of how the principle of natural justice was really, and the rule of law was not prevailing in the process. So now coming into the tribunal reports itself, you know, we took our time to look at word by word, letter by letter, all of the things in the report. And of course, we have our legal people in the consortium. We have the accountant professionals in the consortium. So we'll look at the report in details. And then backed by witness, because we witness all of the sessions in the tribunal. It's for this very reason, because we want to ensure that, the report will reflect exactly what transpired in the tribunal. So backed by what we witness in the tribunal. And then again, we also look at the legal standards. You know, audit profession is just like a lawyer or law. They have legal standards that to follow. So we look at all of the legal standards. We look at the Constitution, we look at the Audit Service Act. It's based on that we arrive at our report, the 8-page report, which I have here. Firstly, we find out that the tribunal rely more on state witness and hearsay without referring to any legal standards or law when arriving at their conclusion. I will give an example of this. You know, one of the main things in this whole tribunal is the aspect of third-party confirmation. And this is in the case of receipts. Mind you, the audit that was done for the Office of the President is compliance audit. It's not financial audit. For financial audit, they will ask the client to send a letter, and that is mainly to confirm bank balances. That's when they will ask and say, okay, I want to get a bank statement from a bank. Can you please authorize that? That's for financial audit. And even the audit standard is not mandatory, but it's acceptable. So that is okay. But the audit that was done for Office of the President is compliance audit. And for compliance audit, it has its own standards for every issue. And in the case of documents, the standard is clear that in the course of auditing, if you are presented a document that has some feature that make it to have doubts on the issues, the auditor can do two things. Number one, hire the expert to follow audit. Number two, contact the third party directly. That's what the standard says. So again, coming back to my point that I said, the conclusion most of them rely on state witness, and here, of course, you know the implication of a state witness when the case is for between the state and another individual. We saw where the tribunal concluded that the process of contacting a hotel to verify the receipt without their consent constitutes breach of misconduct. It's a misconduct issue. And they just rely on state witness on that. They did not point out no legal standard. Even though in the hearings where we attend, we saw those that wrote the standards, the Enterprise Development Initiative. Just like in football, FIFA wrote all the rules of the game. In audit, it's Enterprise that wrote all the rules of the game. Enterprise testified, the director of Enterprise IDA testified in the tribunal that they did the right thing by contacting third party. By the way, if they contacted also the president before verifying the receipt, it will have defeated the purpose of confirming the receipt. And we saw the African aspect, the Enterprise, confirmed. In the hearing, we saw ICASL confirmed that indeed they follow the right standard. It's not just confirming, they cite the section in the standard that gave audit service the rights, the mandate to contact third party without the consent of office of the president. But we saw the tribunal just took what the state witness said and arrived at the conclusion without referring to any legal document, any standards. And mind you, for audit, it is the audit standards, without referring to audit standards that they can use to arrive at their conclusion. So that's one aspect of the report which we find very much problematic. We also saw instances wherein, again, the same hearsay, they just rely on hearsay without any document, and the tribunal report arrive at a conclusion. I will give you an example. Say, for example, the issue of conflict of interest with Sata Mamomo and Laura Tilopias. And the first case, in the case of Laura Tilopias, in the written submission to the Auditor General, they responded on the issue of conflict of interest. But the tribunal now is the place wherein all of them will come with their evidence and discuss the issues. For Laura Tilopias, that issue was never brought up at the tribunal. No evidence was brought up against him to testify at the tribunal. How does the tribunal arrive at a conclusion on that particular issue? In the case of Tamomo, the issue was brought up, and the witness gave his testimony, whatever. And when he was cross-examined, Tamomo was right at the court. He cannot identify Tamomo. And we saw the tribunal relying on that person with statements to arrive at a conclusion that Tamomo really committed conflict of interest. We are in the very tribunal, when he was cross-examined, he cannot identify the person he's cross-examining against.
When you said he could
besides that, he does not came up with no documents, no video, no audio to really show that this is what indeed Tamomo did.
Just to clarify,
conclude that it, yes, please.
When you said he could not identify, was the witness asked to identify Tamomo?
Yes. When cross-examined by Tamomo lawyer, we were there. You know, one of the reasons why...
And the person couldn't?
The person couldn't identify Tamomo in the hearings. This is one of the reasons why we took our time to attend all of the hearings. We sent representatives in all of the hearings. Because we want... It's as if we knew that at the end of the day, we are going to have some partial Auditor General report. So that's again another critical issues, and which put doubt on how does the tribunal arrive at short conclusion. The person with the witness against, unable to identify him, then the tribunal concludes, say, indeed, this is what happened, without no documents, no written, no audio. So that places some doubt on the credibility of the conclusion on that particular issues. We also saw the issues around the auditing of the Transform Freetown project, where the allegation was they stopped an audit of the Transform Freetown project. Again, let me say this. Every year, audit service is auditing Freetown City Council in their normal auditing. The allegation was that they stopped Transform Freetown project. You know, in auditing and accounting, they always follows their laws, their standards, their regulations. It's clear that if the money does not go to that particular institution, and the Transform Freetown project was supported by DFID, now FCDO, all of the resources goes to INGOs. They are the one that directly implemented all of the activities. No resources go to Freetown City Councils. And in the hearing, the testimony is just hearsay. There are no, again, no written, no audio, no video that shows that indeed they denied the halt and audit of Transform Freetown project. It was none of those documents were brought up in the tribunal. All the tribunal relied on was just state witness, and then the tribunal used that to arrive at a conclusion without referring to any standards or law. And in the public sector finance and accounting standards, it's clear when the money does not go to a particular institution. There's a limited role the institution can play, and the role they can only play is in the audits. They will just put an annex in terms for the goods and services they receive. So they will just put the receipt. But Freetown City Council do not do the procurement process. They didn't purchase anything, and the money doesn't go to their accounts. So there is no way the audit service will be able to audit them. And again, the tribunal just rely on the state's witness, and there is no written evidence, no audio, no video that clearly shows that they halt that particular audit. We also saw the issues around the rule of law and the principle of natural justice. Like I mentioned earlier, the aspect of the case with Lava filed at the Supreme Court, up till now, that matter has not yet been heard. In fact, the matter was not enlisted for hearing until after 2 years, 6 months. And mind you, we should have some respect for the highest court of our land. I mean, the Supreme Court is the highest court of our land. If a matter is filed at the Supreme Court, and that matter has to do with directly the constitutionality of the very tribunal itself and the qualification of the members present, it will have been befitting for the tribunal to wait and let the Supreme Court really take a position on that particular one. Now, the matter has not been enlisted and has not been heard. Now, should in case the matter is actually heard and they find out that the tribunal was not constitutionally formed, the members were not qualified. So it means the whole tribunal report will just go in vain, which also means that the people's resources will have been wasted, because government spend resources on this tribunal to pay the panelists and all of these things, on a lot of these things. So there are missteps even in the process of even suspending the Auditor General. And like I mentioned earlier, I mean, it's clear in terms of what does the process say when you want to suspend someone like the Auditor General. The Constitution is clear. It has to go through process. There has to be.
And what's that process? There has
to be, first of all, an investigation initiated where Lara will be involved, everything, and it's after that investigation, the Judicial and Legal Education Commission will now recommend to His Excellency President for suspension.
But how would you be in office when you're being investigated? Does that not give you perhaps undue advantage?
No, these are
or influence?
These are different things. The process is clear in the Constitution on how to remove a Supreme Court judge and how to remove the Auditor General. Mind you, the process of removing the Auditor General is the same way to remove the and firstly, there should have the Judicial and Legal Commission should have received a complaint. They will have firstly they should conduct an preliminary investigation, talk to lawyers and all of the party. It is after that investigation they should now recommend for His Excellency the President to suspend. But what happened? They suspend and they go back. In fact, that's one of the reasons why Bashta Michael resigned, because he rejected that process. We saw when they were other institutions like CAL, they also condemned that they didn't follow the right process. These are some of the missteps. And again, another one around the principle of natural justice. They were suspended for professional misconduct in November. The details of that professional misconduct was not given to them until almost after 6 to 7 months, which is very much unfair. If you are suspending me, let me know why I'm being suspended for. But never until after 6 months, then they were told the details of what they are suspended. So that also befits the principle of natural justice and the rule of law.
All right, Abubakar, let's hear from the government representative. Fingers are pointing at the government that this has become a politically motivated investigation and outcome as opposed to that of accountability. From the 6 organizations he mentioned, we also saw the release last week, I think it was on Friday, by the accountants, the professionals themselves, saying after their own investigation process as accountants, a professional body, they found out that both Lara Telopias and Tamba Momo were not guilty of any professional misconduct. So how did the government arrive at this seat now?
Well, thank you again. I've just listened to my friend about the position they hold, not only his institution that he represents, but several others, and also you just mentioned the accounting body and their position that they have expressed. Let me say that we're first of all living in a democracy, yeah, and so I think some of the conversations we're getting on this particular subject depicts what a democracy should be like. There's going to be various views around the table. People should have that entitlement to come up with their position and be able to express it freely like he's doing now. And therefore, I think we look forward to more of those issues being raised as and how they see it and feel necessary to raise those issues. But this is about the Constitution of the Republic of Sierra Leone. In his closing argument, he's referencing some portions of the Constitution without necessarily being exact, right? So I just want to be exact. There are other areas I'm not going to get into, because if I attempt to get into them like he's raised those issues up, it means we'll be litigating the whole matter at AYV, and I don't think that's the essence of what my presence here is going to be for. On the issue of the law, the provision is Section 137, Act number 6 of the 1991 Constitution, subsections 1 to 7. And it's the threshold that we have for judges, right, entrenched in the Constitution of the Republic of Sierra Leone. It says that if you want to remove a judge, and obviously the Auditor General is regarded, right, in that same sort of bracket, right, as to how to remove, right, an Auditor General. So there has to be a panel, and it says for either 2 reasons, either for infirmity of body or mind in Section 137, subsection 4, or B, for stated misconduct. Now, stated misconduct, B, part of Section 137, subsection 4, is broad. It could mean many things. And therefore, that is why, if you now go on to subsection 5 of Section 137, it says a panel of 3 has to be put together. That panel now has the responsibility to investigate what that stated misconduct is by law. And once investigations are ongoing, contrary to what he's trying to suggest, that individual has to be suspended, right, whilst those investigations are ongoing. It now further says that at the end of the investigation, a report has to be put together. I remember, I think I was invited on this very platform, as in other platforms as well, when the report was out. And the accusation then was, oh, well, why President not pull an ado? Why did not just pull the report Nado? Why did he have to go to His Excellency the President? Because that's the provision under Section 137. I think it's subsection 6, if I'm not mistaken. It says a report should be presented to His Excellency the President. At that point in time, the Deputy Minister of Justice, Alpha Sise, was on record in saying that that report will be made public at some point. But the provision in the Constitution was for that report to be presented to His Excellency the President, which was done. His Excellency the President had to go through the report. At the end, those recommendations contained in the report, one of which says that both the Deputy Auditor General and the Auditor General should be removed from office. What happens? It is contained in subsection 7 of the same section 137. Yeah? It has nothing to do with the executive arm of government, nothing to do with His Excellency the President, nothing to do with government.
Imran, it's not my pleasure to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. You've taken us to the end point. Let's start from the beginning.
I have started.
He spoke about, first of all, their suspension even before the tribunal. You have taken us to the tribunal's report now being presented to the president. Let's take it from the beginning. How come they were suspended even before setting up the tribunal? And the procedure of the tribunal's report, he said that those who set the standards for accountancy globally, they had a representative to testify that they followed professional standards of accountancy. Yet it was not factored into the report. They took state witnesses and hearsay to arrive at a verdict. Please speak to those.
So I have touched on a number of the issues you've raised, but I'll go over them again, right? For the public to probably be able to understand it better. Section 137 again, subsections 1 to 7, lays out the procedure. Yeah, it is contained in the Constitution of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Act number 6 of 1991, and it says thus: subsection 4 talks about if, under which conditions, right, the Auditor General or somebody of that status of a judge can be removed from office. It says either unable to perform their functions or due to infirmity of body or mind, A. B, for stated misconduct. Stated misconduct now triggers its own process under subsections 137. It says for stated misconduct, there has to be a panel. Was a panel put together of 3? Absolutely, yes. Was suspension, were both those individuals suspended whilst those investigations were ongoing? Yes. Now we can have a conversation as to when did this investigation really start, right? And that is what brings into question why were they suspended before the panel or suspended
before the tribunal?
Before the panel was put together, or why were they not suspended after the panel was put together? Right? We can have that conversation, but central to that conversation has to be, when did that investigation start?
When was it?
It must have started definitely because
you say must have. Are you not
so
sure?
Here's the point I'm making. For a panel to be put together, there must have been some preliminary investigation.
Your choices of words.
No.
It doesn't bring certainty. You say must or may.
I am absolutely certain that for a panel to be put together, for there to be stated misconduct, for that panel to now have the opportunity to investigate what that stated misconduct is, yeah, as provided for, I think, in section 137, subsection 5, there must have been some preliminary investigation. It is based on that, yeah, you now trigger a process. So there are preliminary investigation, and for those preliminary investigations to happen, those suspensions should have taken place by then. The panel now has the liberty and the latitude, as provided for under subsection 5 of section 137, to now look into those fine details, yeah? And that was what we saw unfolding. Those hearings were made public, those sittings were public, there was nothing that was done in secrecy. People had the opportunity to attend, it was covered by all the major news networks in this country, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, they now have the responsibility, as provided for under section 137, to now produce a report. I think it's subsection 6. Producing a report, it clearly states that that report should be presented to His Excellency the President and nobody else. Clearly spelled out in the law. Present a report to His Excellency the President. His Excellency the President was presented a report. He eventually made that report public, and
still, before getting to the report, getting to President, he also spoke about Lara and Tamba being investigated, but only getting official information of what they're being investigated for 6 months after the investigation process was already in play.
Now you can.
So how can you be investigated, but you're not officially informed of what you're being investigated for, to also put you in a position to put together your evidence for your defense?
So here's the point. If a suspension has taken place and a panel has been put together, now I did not play any part in the work of the panel and what the tribunal had to do and the sequence they had to follow. I'm going strictly by what is provided for under section 137, subsections 1 to 7. And we can go through it word for word. It is quite clear. It needs no interpretation. You do not even need to have a legal mind to be able to understand various subsections under section 137. So my point is, was she afforded an opportunity, right, to defend herself, both her and the deputy, in those proceedings as they unfolded? Absolutely. Were those proceedings made public? Yes. Now,
Imran, you're asking yourself the wrong questions. Please go with the questions that we are asking. Sorry, you're dealing with the burden of communication.
No, I'm not dealing with any. It's not a burden for me.
You just said you were not part of those proceedings, but as the comms person, you the burden of coming to explain, provide the answers to the questions, even though you were not part of the process.
It's about.
So the question still remains what I asked you earlier. How come they were being investigated, but only got the official information of what they were investigated for 6 months into the investigation, as Abubakar just said it?
I don't want you can ask the question again, and I'm sure we can meander around the issue that you're trying to raise. I want to stick to what the constitutional provisions are.
Unfortunately for you, Imran, we ask the questions, you provide the answers. So we cannot let you ask yourself the questions and provide the answers you choose to provide.
So I have a responsibility to provide answers.
And we have the responsibility to ask the questions, not allow you ask yourself the questions.
I appreciate you keep coming back, and I also would like you to appreciate the fact that I think I should be able to express myself, I mean, in as much as you keep coming back. So here's the point for me. Right? The provisions are quite clear under section 137, subsections 1 to 7. I think we need to be able to have a look at what the subsections say, right, to be able to understand and appreciate what unfolded over time. Were those, again, I'm coming back to the point.
So did that section say that they should not be informed of the official investigation until 6 months into the investigation?
It quite clearly states that a tribunal has to be set up. It quite clearly states that those individuals, I mean, should be suspended. It quite clearly states that a report has to be provided, right? And it also says that that report should be provided to His Excellency the President. And ultimately, I'm sure that the essence of probably some of the conversations we're having this morning is about checks and balances. Yeah? Where do they come in under section 137, subsections 1 to 7? Is there enough checks, right, in the process whilst it is unfolding? And absolutely. At every given point, it has been taken away from the executive arm of government to the tribunal. When the tribunal produces a report, it says, okay, it recommends, amongst many things, that the Auditor General should be removed from office, that the deputy should be removed from office. It doesn't come back to the executive arm of government. What it states is quite clear. It now goes to Parliament. Parliament becomes the final arbiter, and not by a simple majority. If you read subsection 7, under section 137, it says 2/3 majority, quite clearly, 2/3 majority. And that two-thirds majority ensures it becomes a bipartisan approach. Now, in all of the issues being raised by my brother from BAN and the institutions that he represents here this morning, I'm sure they should begin now to interface and engage with parliamentarians. Produce your reports to them, engage them, to be able to lobby and let them understand what your positions are, because ultimately it goes back to them. It is now, I mean, firmly in their domain to be able to come to those decisions by a 2/3 majority. That is for the Auditor General. For the Deputy, it quite clearly states that it is the board of the Audit Service Commission that has the responsibility to follow through on the recommendations for the Deputy Auditor General, and therefore that will be done by the board. But for the Auditor General, it goes to Parliament by a 2/3 majority. Now, we can have a conversation as much as we want to, and I probably would not feel inclined to be part of those conversations in terms of what did the accounting body say, what did this body say, and all of the rest of it. Because
unfortunately for you, since your salary comes from taxpayers' money, you would unfortunately have to put up with answering those questions.
No, I am not, and here's my point. Simply because that has already been litigated before a competent jurisdiction. It is not my responsibility to sit here at AYV and begin to litigate every single one of those issues. Your responsibility now is to make sure you come up with your own conclusions contained in your own report and present it to Parliament. You now have a responsibility to canvass Parliament. I cannot sit here and begin to say, oh, well, what one of the judges said should have been this. This is how it should have been. That would be litigation.
But how do you defend that? How do you defend that?
Cannot.
How do you defend that, Imran, saying this, shifting yourself away from the conversation now, when the genesis started from the investigations into the office of the president, which now, especially how things are panning out, is leaving your government with the blame to say this has all been a political witch hunt simply because her investigation now went into the office of the president?
So I'm just coming from Morning Coffee SLBC, and I had the same question about witch hunt, right? And this is where I feel slightly bemused, right, and amazed that somehow people might seem to have the view or characterize what happened as witch hunt. Because, I mean, if you have any inkling or idea about the provisions under Section 137, that will surely not be your conclusion, and that will surely not be your assertion. Let us go back to the law. What I have stuck to since the start of this conversation has been Section 137, subsection 127.
Do you know why that becomes a part of the conversation?
It's about following due process.
Imran,
look, something happened.
Do you know what? Hold on, Imran. Do you know why that comes as part of the conversation?
No, I do not understand.
It's because when you go a few years back, this former Auditor General, Lara Taylor Pierce, was the one whose Auditor General's report predicated the GTT report, which led to the formation of the commissions of inquiry set up by your government upon arrival into office. And then she was praised for the professional work exposing corruption, mismanagement of state resources. Again, go back to your GTT report. It was predicated on the Auditor General's report. Fast forward to the time when they're investigating the office of the current president, this whole issue sparks up. So forgive the public for connecting the dots politically and making that a witch hunt.
I hold a fundamentally different view, and I don't see the nexus at all, because at the end of the day, there was a job. So how was she professional then, but very unprofessional now? Somebody had a job to execute then. It does not mean that...
which your government dubbed professional.
It does not mean that a job was executed and that stays for a lifetime at every given point. We all have a responsibility to follow the law and follow due process. Ultimately, right, Section 137, subsection 4 quite clearly states the conditions under which you can institute a procedure to remove someone and investigate someone. And it says for either infirmity of body or mind, A, or B, for stated misconduct. A panel was put together. That panel did its job. A report was produced. It was made public. It was not done in secrecy. That report was produced. It was sent to His Excellency the President. His Excellency the President has now removed himself from the process completely. This has nothing to do with the executive arm of government again. I mean, my elementary government, Form 1, Form 2, St. Edward Secondary School, luckily enough, I went to a very good school, tells me about separation of powers, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. It is now with the third arm of government, right? The legislature. They have a responsibility. His Excellency the President has no part to play in this. It is down to, and look, 2/3 majority. Let us do the maths here now, right? As we're having these conversations. 2/3 majority now means that members of the APC would ultimately have to side, right, with those recommendations for us to be able to have a two-thirds majority. Now, that's the spirit of Section 137. That's where the safeguard comes in. So it's not as if it's just going to be SLPP MPs who are going to sit in a room, lock themselves in, and have that 2/3 majority. No, it is inconceivable. It has to be by for us to have that 2/3 majority. Now, what the Deputy Minister of Justice has said in public is this, that we would live with the decisions taken by Parliament as it relates to the Auditor General. So whether the decision is for or against those recommendations, those are decisions this government would live with.
Mr. Sillah, before we go further or forward, I've just spent the last few minutes reading the entirety of Section 137, which you've been quoting since you stepped into the studio this morning. And you'll be surprised to know, if at all you haven't read this already, that the whole section here is actually talking about judges of the Superior Court of Sierra Leone. And you even quoted subsection 4, which is also talking about judges of the Superior Court of Sierra Leone. And now, you see, the thing is,
I know what I'm talking about.
Now, except
there's a threshold.
Except it is a smoke screen, but I feel you are quoting something that could be quite irrelevant to this discussion, because
so you think?
Subsection 4, I think I have read, and from the literature that
You're
is in
having
front
a
of me.
literal interpretation now of the law.
Now, so the thing is, you have been banking on this
That's a very
particular
literal
provision.
interpretation you're having of the law.
You've been banking on this provision.
I have said
it
you-
doesn't talk about an auditor general being
So
removed
you have
from
not
office.
been. You have not been. My former boss, Mohammed Rahman Suare, loves
If-
to. He loves to say
Let's
this.
just be clear. That's why I'm doing this.
That's why you have not been following with profit all of the things I have said sitting here. I have stated quite clearly. No, you don't need to show that to me.
Okay.
Right? I know it. You can
know
wake me
it.
up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll go through all of those sections, section 137, subsections 1 to 7. It is the threshold, the office. The office of the Auditor General is being regarded as that of a High Court judge. Also, and so that threshold in removing a judge applies to the office of the Auditor General. So even though, so that's what I'm saying, you have not been following with profit. Even though it does not
So the
literally
thing
tell
is-
you, let me finish. And this for public consumption. Even though it does not literally tell you about the Auditor General's office, it is the threshold. Yeah, that is what they're using, and it's applicable to the office of the Auditor General.
So this is the very
That's
reason
what
why they are
triggers
calling
the rest
for
of the
a total
process.
overhaul. This is why they are calling for a total overhaul even of the 1991 Constitution of Sierra Leone. There are a lot of
No,
lacunas.
but that's a
actually.
secondary argument we can have completely.
Well-
Far removed from this, and I'll tell you the reason why.
It is through this
You
instrument
can call
that
for
this particular
overhaul.
individual or these
You can
particular
call for
individuals were
overhaul.
judged.
You can call for overhaul as much as you want to. We can all sit here and ask for overhaul of the whole of the 1991 Constitution. And we can also sit here and begin to talk about what is happening to the constitutional review process and what the late Justice Edmund Cowan did and all the rest of it. But what we have now in place that we have to live by is the 1991 Constitution. That's the difference, my friend.
Isn't it ironical
That's
that
the difference.
all of these civil society organizations, including the, should I say, the most accredited financial or accounting institution in this country, have pointed finger against the government for being biased in this tribunal report? Doesn't it bother you in any way that perhaps there could have been, if even you do not want to believe this, that there could have been some, serious blunders along the way?
So, I mean, again, I think we need to agree on a few points as we move forward. I mean, to your question. Do we now accept and concede that that threshold that applies to judges is a threshold that applies to the office holder as the auditor, of the Auditor General? We now concede to that point, right? So the premise you raised did not exist in actual fact, number one. Number two, we also have to agree, based on that section 137, subsections 1 to 7, that every single one of those subsections under section 137 was followed through on. Now, if those two assertions are true and correct and valid, your third point and the question you raised is of no consequence. And what do I mean by that? It now means we have followed due process. We have followed the Constitution of the Republic of Sierra Leone. In as much as we may want to change it, in as much as there is a need for constitutional review, in as much as we need to review and bring clarity to sections and certain subsections under the Constitution of the Republic of Sierra Leone, that's the essence of constitutional review.
If you were the people,
But for now, what we have, and you may agree or disagree, look, it is not every ruling in life that is being
that is fair,
that is considered
fair
by some to be
fair,
to be correct and accurate.
But so that's you're saying that not all tribunals should be fair and accurate.
I'm saying it is inherent in the legal profession and in law.
For some.
No. It is inherent. Let me finish. I'm choosing my words carefully. I understand what I'm talking about. It is inherent in the legal profession and in law that for every judgment you have, whether be it at magistrate, whether be it at high court, whether be it at Supreme Court, whether be it at Court of Appeal, for there to be various views, right, and for people to disagree. And that is why people go there. If you're the defendant or the accused, you have your counsel. Your counsel would always hold a different view. Even when verdict is being handed down, they would always. So take, for example, we have the choosing trials. Verdicts have been passed on, not so. For some of those who are arraigned before the courts, not so, on choosing trial. talk to their lawyers. They will tell you that they disagree with those verdicts, right? And if they have an opportunity, they will tap. So it's inherent in the nature of the law, in the spirit
So we have
of the law, for
understood
there to be disagreement.
well, we've understood your
point
point.
is,
That's not all tribunals
my point
or
is,
tribunal reports
I'm
should
talking
be
about law,
that
not specifically
accurate.
tribunal report.
Now, I
because
understand.
it relates to the law,
I
right?
understand.
So what the tribunal was doing was something that
Let's hear
relates to the
from.
law. I mean,
Firstly, I want to go into the issues around the constitutions, and then one of the recommendations from the tribunal report that the Constitutional Review Committee should consider, looking at how to monitor or discipline Auditor General, which we found very disturbing. And what we recommend that if all the Constitutional Review Committee is taking on this recommendation, they should how to strengthen the audit institution, provide clarity on some issues that are not very much clear in the Constitution, and also provide clarity on some existing gaps. Let it don't be that because we have this issue now and it's against the state and law and Tamamamo, then the Constitutional Review Committee should now find a way to punish or discipline Auditor General. For us, it's about strengthening the Constitution, provide clarity, and then where there are gaps and strengthen that gap. Because for us, what does it mean? It means that trying to limit the operational power of the institutions. Mind you, all of this issue we are doing is not for Tamamamo and Laha, it's for the people of Swahili. Because that institution protects the people's resources. When that institution works well, it will help to reduce corruption. It will help to ensure that there is value for money. So it's about the institution. There are 2 points which I may want to bring out quickly around, again, the report. Of course, Imran doesn't want to talk about the detailed report, that's fine.
I don't want to relitigate. It's not as if I don't want to talk about it, because that's litigation.
We saw again in this tribunal report the absence of clearly cited legal and professional standards. No, the tribunal failed to specify the legal or professional standards applied to determine whether the Auditor General and the Deputy engage in misconduct. In fact, the report, after they outlined the methodology and function of audit service, they went straight into evidence without defining what is the misconduct, let alone what constitutes serious misconduct, without also defining what threshold of that misconduct should tantamount to the removal. The report lacks that one very clearly. And if you are dealing with an issue, you should first of all state what that issue is, what are the things that if you go against, supposed to tantamount to a recommendation for removal and what. So the report also, another one which I'll look at quickly before I respond to some of the issues in one way, is the misapplication of the Audit Service Act and the 1991 Constitution. We saw where the tribunal finding of the breach of section 36(1) of the Audit Service Act 1924. We find out that one is very troubling because the offense created at that section of the Act can only be committed by the person from whom the Auditor General seeks information or who are subject to an audit. This clearly cannot be committed by an Auditor General in terms of requesting for information. So therefore, the tribunal, when they conclude at that finding, will find it very much disturbing and very much problematic. Now, just to respond to Imran on the issues, because of course, yes, what he read, it also applied to the Auditor General, because it says the way to remove the judge is the same way they are also going to remove the Auditor General. So that's one of the reasons why we think the judiciary should have also ensured that there is the principle of natural justice. How can Lara file a case 2 years back, now almost going to 3 years now? That case has not been heard.
Abubakar, because we're running out of time, we'll have to round off this conversation. What's the way forward?
Well,
clearly, with Imran's position, it tells you that your calls to the government are sort of being ignored because government still remains defensive, that as far as they know, they've not done anything wrong.
Misplaced, I would say. It should be to Parliament now. So it's nothing to do with government. It's now Parliament.
Going forward?
You know,
and Parliament, by the way, is part of government.
Third arm, completely separate.
Still part of government.
It regulates itself.
Our recommendations to 3 institutions: 1, Parliament; the judiciary and the constitutional committee. But before I delve into this, for God's sake, and for let people Australia know that how can Parliament go and discuss a report that has so many procedural evidential deficiencies?
So what would you rather have the Parliament do?
So for us, in fact, we'll read this one. We say, subsequent to the glaring legal and procedural and evidential deficiency in the tribunal work, as well as the obvious discrepancies and gaps in the report, Parliament should neither dismiss the report or the recommendations, the tribunal recommendation, I mean, because the gaps are so many in this report. Or, if Parliament decides to look into this one, we want Parliament to send a report back to the Attorney General to provide more clarification and provide all of the details, the annexes, the evidence, the testimonies, for them to have a clear picture of what is in the report. Because there are a lot of annexes, the state witness, the law witness, so we want, if they are looking at it, to send it back to have all of that information before they will now go into looking at that particular report. The second one is on the judiciary. I mean, for God's sake, Lawa don't file this case over close to 3 years now. We highest court, the most respected court of the land, takes it enough from the tribunal for looking into that case. They fail not of fear. And the case where he filed, now the very tribunal in constitutionality itself, the qualification of the member there. So we say, be alert the judiciary speedily look into the case where Lawa Pierce filed. Of course, the one on constitutional review committee, I've already read it in terms of, I mean, if only they are going to look into the recommendation proposed by the report, they should focus on how to identify, how to fill in the gap, identify the area where there are no clarity, not to find a way to reduce the operational independence of the audit institution.
Thank you very much, Abubakar and Imran. Obviously, this is a developing story. We would have to continue following up on the organizations you've been representing and the outcome of the recommendations you've made and steps you would be taking going forward. Thank you, Imran, and thank you, Abubakar, for your time joining us this morning in the program.